connected to the psalm, happy shall he be who taketh and dasheth the little ones against the stones. Like, if he wants everyone being more biblical, then what's his complaint? That these abortion clinics aren't throwing abortions at stones? Like, maybe if they took the stones of the Ten Commandments from the lawns of the courthouse, everyone secular is going to have more respect for the proceedings of the courthouse, while the abortion clinics will have stones that the biblicists can imagine the fetus has been thrown against. Because there's certainly nothing nothing against abortion in the Bible. I think this is about a more base idea of man taking hold of powers that were it's intimidating to the fundamentalists, because such powers were deemed to have been God's domain. So that they don't like the transition and the implied transitional shift in language that will bear out in the following generations, where certain things are understood. Now, see, the Moses story and the story of the Ten Commandments being brought down from Mount Sinai is an honored one. But when you ask yourself and you think about why that is, it's really quite disgusting. Moses has in his possession, he's leading some slaves that he's freed, and he fucks off for 40 days, said, after creating walkways through oceans and spreading waves apart so that people could walk through them. And Moses just has to disappear for whatever reason. Now, once he reappears, he has these 2 blocks with these 10 commandments written on them. And then what happens is he finds that it seems he expected a shift of like, well, I just created this, so all you motherfuckers best believe it. And now, because he turns hostile when he sees the worshipping of the golden bull calf, which, as I already explained, was quite possibly Taurus the bull from the pagan faiths. And I also brought to mention the fact that as people didn't have much of a process-based education back then, it was all that's why the witch hunts and heresy hunts were considered just. If you had a neighbor who you knew was casting spells, and then someone in your family got a cold or a runny nose or something, you'd blame it on the witchcraft family, that perhaps they cast a spell, and you think, what? And your God didn't block it. It's like this is why I could have appreciated real-time strategy games more. But Moses, sees these people worshipping the golden bull calf, and I'm suggesting that he didn't mediate with enough empathy, because in taking a god away from people, and here's the other thing, the law stated not to have any other gods prioritized before Moses' God. Let's say that was the Yahweh of the Bible. So it doesn't actually say anything about eliminate the existence of. It doesn't stipulate that you may not spend any time in comprehension of gods other than Yahweh. It just asks that they don't be placed, be given a priority seating. Now, that if you'd taken over leading a whole group of slaves, and then sort of annex the way they talk, they might have believed that the golden bull calf causes the rain, causes the crops to grow. Or they might have believed in a bunch of different gods. I'm saying that commandment in particular could have been a tremendously confounding and confusing one. Not because the slaves had a problem in principle showing a fair worship to a just God, but simply because so much of their understanding of language grew with them contingent on polytheism, which is endorsing the belief in the existence of numerous gods. Now, as punishment for the golden bull calf thing, Moses goes and... So you'll notice what I'm suggesting, pay attention to how this gets reenacted out and out again. Like, so it's taken for granted in the Origins account that if you are invested in this book, of the children of Cain, which is to say you're the progeny of someone who minced his brother, murdered his brother, and it's left to your imagination whether Cain goes home and says, "Well, Dad, I've killed my brother to make more children and propagate the species. Are you gonna impregnate Mum, or do you want me to impregnate Mum?" But these were the types of conversations they were left having, and it's so written that we never quite know whether one did the job, whether they went, "Well, Cain, your skills on the field are proven. You're quite good at murdering your brother. Why don't you be the one to, pump your mother full of your seed?" Or whether he went, "No, Adam, you're the first man. You're God. Woman wouldn't even exist were it not for the rib that you sacrificed. In true humility, you should be the one to pump her full of a new frontier of new pregnancies." But so I'm suggesting that certain things are taken for granted in the minds of the children of Cain, like how sensitive to suicide would you be if you're like out in the front line going, "Yeah, I'm Moses. I've just freed all these slaves, and now I've accepted the responsibility of looking after them all. I've just gone and written. I've gone off for 40 days and written down all these new laws for them. But they seem to prefer hugging this golden calf. So now I will order them all to suicide in order to purify themselves." And that was the idea Moses had. Now, why didn't he get that idea from being a child of Cain? Is the question I'm putting to you. And in doing so, in being a child of Cain, how come? Would you agree that that's a valid reason for him to lose sensitivity to the phenomenon of like, well, wow, in releasing all these slaves from Egypt, they've got some serious readjusting to do. They're trying to learn your language, but they are in your care. You're holding them all in your care, and you're saying they need to all go and kill themselves because they're quite fond of a bull. What if it's in their culture that this golden bull is rather essential to their lifestyle? How are you gonna mediate between that understanding of theirs and whatever it is that you have to say? And would Moses have cared to think down those lines, or would he have cared more to just go, feel the power of my supercharged, brother-killing, incest, suicide motivating powers, and off yourselves one by one? Because that's what Moses does. So why? I'm not saying that all of the Ten Commandments are horrid ideas. I'm saying some of it's very common sense. But we've had Islamist cartoonists bomb buildings so much that now students who want to go on to study Islamic terrorism, when they pick up these textbooks to study the cartoons that catalyze this series of bombings, it's such a lockdown, tight security topic that they can't even find replicas of the mocked cartoon drawings duplicated in the textbooks. So they can't even visually look at what cartoons it was that pissed the terrorists off while they're studying a course on these sort of mishaps. Now, so the scientific crackdown. It's insulting to be told, bring us a scientific proof. We live in a world where if we get a scientific proof that's so undeniable, like Galileo proving that Earth rotates around the sun and that Earth is no longer to be considered like a baby's cot with God looking down through the sky, that pissed off the Vatican and the Church for centuries, and they deem Galileo a heretic. Now the heresy charge was dropped on Galileo in 1993, so I'm not sure what faith you're involved in, but most of those two have sussed out the situation, worked out that Galileo had been well dead for some time, so he never got to hear his own congratulations, Galileo, you are no longer a heretic. The Catholic Church aren't fast to make up their mind when proven wrong. Information in science flows the other way. If a scientist is wrong, they want to hear what you've got to say that rivals their idea as soon as you can. You're invited to, you're encouraged to, and that's what applying scientific method is. So we have a history that the repeating theme is, this was once religiously explained by, wound treatment. So no antiseptics, no betadine, no no creams with combinations of antiseptics and anesthetics and provide iodine and none of that. If you have a wound, the gods are in your breath, spit in the wound. And then you have science coming along going, well, no, this actually demonstrates this will heal this, and this provide iodine will dry up various forms of infections if you apply a concentrated amount of provide iodine here. And so you have this history of religion offering an answer to something, and then science coming along later. It's often very tortoise in the hare, but then science eventually coming along later and going, well, here's an answer and it works better. But how often has it run the other way? How many examples can you think of like where there's a problem that science has been giving you answers to? Like call a locksmith if your locks are damaged. It's not like, and suddenly, the solution is that if you sit in a meditative position and you hum every third note of the national anthem, then all of a sudden a new key and lock, a new lock will appear installed in your door and a new key in your pocket. We don't have experiences where science has had an answer and then religion has come forward and usurped science's claim. But yeah, in philosophy, I'm a hater of shitty dichotomies. I'm a hater of either you're an advocate of religious notions of free will, or you're a strict determinist. Being pressed to take the title when you haven't really assessed the nuances of what's involved with the role till you feel content enough to be assertive. And that's to do with onus. And that's a big difference between me and Gary Cairns and Roger Toll, like I've already said. I assess and think about a lot of contingencies before accepting or being open to accepting onus. Well, you think back to kids and swapping the A for the O, like the adults only rating. But are you placing it on the telly or taking it off? Shh. And swap some vowels around and onus becomes anus, and steroid becomes hemorrhoid, and yeah. And then Gary will be at work the next day smiling, calling everyone love, especially calling you love if you're on high rebate sedatives, and shorts on, socks up, schoolboy look. And Roger will talk shit, his breath smelling like shit, crutched by the hem of his garment, and hammering his hemorrhoid. Anusol, suppositories or ointment, available at Capital Chemist, yo. Just ask for Ped Homie. Say, yo, Ped Homie. Say some words, son. Say some words. So, yo, yeah. Even well outside of art and in just a general where's society going type sense of progression, I see a lot in awareness of epistemology to some extent. Epistemology is if you're watching admire scenes from like where they're using the universal translator in Star Trek. It's kind of like applying some part of your concentration to working a bit like a translator, but you're looking at structure and like sort of anthropological nuance to language. This branch of inquiry came to love it was summarized in George Smith's book. He said, to ask, well, what can we know? That's a question of metaphysics, and how can we know what we can know? That's a question of epistemology. So, an illustration I liked was like everything being binary, and instead of debating this whole, do we admire the more historic golden rule of that which is reprehensible to you, don't do to another, versus do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, when our minds can just quietly observe and wonder about, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, being a description from relativity that holds for human interactions and exchanges. And both at the same time learning to be more careful with how experiments are designed, because where an impact on it is what I learned from causing a paramecium to explode under my microscope. And it's what quantum physicists debate about. If you start an experiment with this type of apparatus, it's going to frame the results to a certain extent. The results will come about in a certain way. So thinking and being mindful of that, like a Zen Buddha mindful, and also mindful of how we're a part of the great study as well. Though poetically Bowie would speak of us as having outgrown our youth, and that was in his lyrics in the 70s. We're somewhat redundant, finished our news, and we've outgrown our youth. But what you see if you go, well, what's your epistemology like? And William Lane Craig tries to bring it into God debates, but I don't think he does a good job. I think he does it to try to sound more technical than he really is, because his business reasonable faith to me is an oxymoron. If he was to convert you to Christianity his way, he'll ultimately say your conversion isn't not going to happen unless you make an avowed leap of faith. So in the end, he'll say it's all about faith. So you go, well, why have you called your business reasonablefaith.org? And he's made it it's contrary to the Bible. The Bible is making and calling virtuous those who have faith in spite of all reason. They're the commended ones. So to make a business called reasonable faith, it just means all he's done is he's tried to find some pop contestants of who don't really falsify the theories that they hate or the arguments that they hate. He just likes to cite their names as sources and say, well, I've got this whole posse of people who are really reasonable about getting you into faith. It's not that he's epistemologically united faith-based belief with the processes of applied reasoned thinking, as the title of his business implies. So yeah. And get some music ready for my iPod. I'm back. Enjoy my show of my adventures this morning at Civic. It was well educational. Oh yeah, no. So yeah, so they're marching out what they make their epistemology into. Epistemology and concepts of your epistemology will affect your mode of behavior. Like I've tried to say, if the government made our epistemology, the Three Little Pigs, we would have panics as soon as 3 people were ever detected to be in the one house. If you had 2, it'd be okay. If you had 4 or more, that would be okay. But if you had 3, then the house is, flagged for various tests and quarantined, and that's where we'd be at if the Three Little Pigs was our epistemology. Everyone would be concerned about their home getting huffed and puffed and blown down, and so the best way to make sure that doesn't happen would be that group houses always contain either more than or less than 3 people. Whereas what I'm trying to say is, if your epistemology is this origin story, and it's your proud heritage, and it's about killing your brother with a mind to either tag team your mum with your dad, or watch your dad make a bunch of kids who then have sex with each other, or that your ancestor goes off and has sex with, all while thinking, oh, this is the only way for the species to survive. I'm saying that idea is sexually gross. You would want to be fighting it in court. There isn't any way to respect it. If I go to court over a matter, I don't touch the Bible, because if I did, I wouldn't really expect anyone there to take what I had to say serious. Yeah, so it bears out in Moses, the killing of Cain, killing his brother. Okay, Moses makes a fuck up. They're not doing exactly. Yeah. This vindicates the earlier point. Moses has the slaves freed, and he brings them the golden bull calf, and no, sorry, he brings them the Ten Commandments, but instead they're worshipping the golden bull calf. So his next thought is to order them all to suicide. Well, do you think if he had a heritage story where his Cain and Abel were two brothers that solved problems together, or if they didn't have that story where God wants to test the faith of Abraham, so he says, kill Isaac, your son, to prove that you have faith. And so Abraham gets Isaac laid down on a rock, ready to murder him. And then God stops him, going, no, that was the test, don't worry. You passed the test. Like, that's still a fucked up test. All he would have had to have done was scan his brain with his mind, with God's mind, and God would have found out everything he needed to find out without incessant child abuse. So, when they start out with this legacy that's just so fucked up, they're stepping out from it and calling it their holy origins. And in the town of Sodom and Gomorrah, you have two angels visit the town, and the town's really reprobate and kinky, and they're practicing a lot of. That's why the term sodomy exists, and the sodomites are doing everything, 69ing and doggy style and sucking dicks, and so these angels turn up, and a couple of the sodomites oh, there's angels here, and then they put their heads together and they plan to rape the angel. So, like, why didn't this idea come back from the unhealthy idea of intercourse with Eve, the first mum? But anyway, and then the noble guy in the town steps up and says, to bring peace to the situation, he tells the angels, don't worry, you'll be safe. Tells the guys that we're going to rape the angels to back off, and he diverts their attention by offering his daughters to the rapists, so that the rapists can rape his daughters instead of raping the angels that were visiting the town. And then so that way the angels were allowed to visit the town without getting raped. The town didn't become known as a town that raped angels, and the man saved the day in terms of the tourists' reputation for the town of Sodom. But yeah, you can see all these little transferences come off the original cast and crew of Adam and Eve. So you can see it in you can see Cain's slaughtering Abel again in Moses's mass suicide of his slaves. Negotiation. Any of us could have negotiated any of those situations better, so that no blood was shed. But this is, like I said, like the Bible starts. It should say in the front of the Pentateuch, warning that you are in the possession of a highly inbred literary content. No, it's 2020. Now it should only be like Texas courts that still endorse or pander to this gesture, supposedly a gesture of respect to the preceding judge, to touch the Bible beforehand, before a case. And yeah, outside of Texas, where, by the way, they need a lot more medicine. They need a lot more people with medical degrees, apparently, in Texas. They're running shy. But yeah, taking Enlightenment values and doing more than what the Founding Fathers did in terms of pointing the criticism back at the content of theology. The Founding Fathers did it to an extent, but there's so much more that could be done. That's an aspect of their work that I would be happy to try to build on. West Side. West Side. And yeah, I mean, am I here with answers? Not really. I'm just trying to describe how stupid the situation looks, and why build a philosophy like that and go, well, and this is already pushing some buttons, because this is talking to them as though they've admitted, first and foremost, to this talk about them being activists in population culling. And what does it mean? Can a person be so injured that they get culled? Would you cull them and not the rest of their family? So drunk on mutually beneficial negotiations is sort of how I've learned to perceive Gary over the years. And yeah, if it benefits Capital Chemist, then you can go for it. Is like the dogma, but it's a fair fucking fascist dogma, because you might actually want to be a critic of, just like the magazine that Information magazine. That was a good magazine, and it even addressed the topic of pharmacists tempted to use various substances ranging from stimulants to pain relievers to calmatives while they're working. So these issues were real enough that they'd be brought up and discussed in the issue of this pharmacist-only magazine. Well, actually, I'm not sure it was fine. It might have just been about issues going on within pharmacy. What I dislike more is this Masonic idea that you've got to be serving our interests. It ultimately means you've been encouraged to dislike the same football teams, like the idea of a company buying out this premises. Where would it end? It's also the immune from challenge, doing their best to make themselves immune from being challenged on the. And this is where the Amish have retreated, so that there's it's almost acknowledged by their customs and their geography. That, you know, well, unless they start throwing plates and tumbleweeds at us, I don't think they're planning any sort of invasive evangelist enchargement. But Mormons, Uniting Church, Christians, Pentecostal, and remember what we've already talked about. Like, we've already looked at how weird it is and how it spins the head out just to imagine people located beneath, like beneath the surface of the ground. It's not a new idea. Like I said, 2015's Prophet's Prey is a documentary that it'll discuss that topic of underneath hiding points, because this leader of a fundamentalist denomination of Mormonism is... See, the same thing happened that I said would always happen. The Mormon Church is debating how they should operate correctly, and they end up branching out 4 ways. And this Prophet's Prey is a documentary on the life and mind of the most fundamentalist leader that the community ever knew. You weren't allowed to wear red. He's later found to have interfered with a lot of the kids, to have taken many wives, in consistency with his theology, and to have raped. I mean, there pretty much wasn't anyone left in the community that he hadn't touched in one way or another. So they all said to him, you know, you're going down. Get the fuck down and away from here. And so he had to write about, you know, the irony of God challenging him by sending him into the underground tunnels where all the scumbags were, and and yeah, so that's that. So that Freemasonry should have any expectation about what a person should choose to do with his or her life. I think Freemasonry needs to admit that it's beyond the scope and limitations of being a Freemason to impose or monopolize on that question as it's been posed to another. Because really a former employee or a short-term employee, they really don't owe you and toll pure unadulterated proclamations about how they don't intend any future lines of work that may be deemed offensive to the community of Freemasons.
This is a boy and this is a girl. Most people can't tell difference. You have gift. You work on my cousin's chicken hatchery. Wow, my first summer job. Wait, Steve, what about our summer of exotic adventure? We'll do it together. And just like that, I'm working for the Chinese again. I'll take a chai latte, please. Sweet. Just like you. Haley, how about them digits? 757. Are you gonna marry my daughter? What? Dad! I'm not gonna let you date another loser.
Yeah, so it's antithetical to independence, self-responsibility, choosing thine own path to thine own self be true. And it's arrogant too, because it tries to meter non-Masonic approved lines of work as anti-Masonic rival upheavings, which they need not be. You know, I mean, I'm confronting them with valid criticisms now and in these recordings, and the most I get back from them is, you know, am I confrontation? So yeah, once taken their case involving an employee that they had, who they understand is confrontable and open to discuss issues of philosophy. When I say that theology doesn't count for a philosophy, it's because I consider it to be so arbitrary. It lacks even the vision of, like, the writer of The Little Red Hen, who thought that, you know, the hens that don't participate in the making of the bread will serve symbolically as characters that illustrate, you know, having to go without the food because they didn't contribute to the making of it. And you know, theology lacks even the characters are vehicles for certain ideas. It was quite rightly called the study of nothing by a philosopher who I can't remember at the moment. Benjamin Franklin said that lighthouses are much more useful than churches. Thomas Jefferson Jefferson put together a book where he took all the statements of Jesus, removing all the miraculous feats and any accounts or testimony that contradicted known laws of physics, and republished the book, calling it The Faith and Moral Teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. Thomas Paine. I mean, Franklin got off to, you know, well, I'm not sure if it was a combination of laughter and tragedy, but watching the hype and hysteria build up inside these metallic churches, everyone's clapping and screaming, singing songs, and then there's a thunderstorm, and invariably the lightning would attract the metal cross on the roof of the church. So this was interpreted by God to be a direct signal from God to the priest that certain members of the congregation had not yet made their confessions. So he'd double back around and staunch, you know, who hasn't confessed then? Who hasn't confessed? But I think it was Paine who said this story of redemption won't stand examination, that mankind should redeem himself for the sins of eating an apple by doing a murder on Jesus Christ is really the sickest and most perverted form of religion ever set up. I'm not paying you back for gas or the Doritos. I know I said we'd share, so here. I like what a lot of what the founding fathers